from Greater Sandton and beyond. Get ready for the Sandton Times Hour
with your host,
Alexander. Ladies and gentlemen, everyone in between and beyond, welcome to the Sandton Times Hour. It's edition 234, week 11 of 2026. I'm Alexander Leipner, and welcome to our first-time listeners. If you are out there and that's you, well, drop us a line on WhatsApp, 084 726 3866. 084 726 3866, and we're not going to embarrass you, but we just want to send you a hello, or you're going to send us a hello, an emoji, or whatever it is, and it'll be good to hear from you and have you part of the show. So special welcome to you. And if you're listening as a regular listener from anywhere in Johannesburg, Pretoria, across South Africa, or everywhere else in the world, online or on air, wherever you are, I'm happy to report that all is well in Sandtonland, and it's good to have you back on the Sandton Times Hour for another week. Vincenzo, our audio man, is back behind the mixing desk, and I have to tell you, Vincenzo, it's been a bit of a quiet week. Maybe nothing of significance to report back on, or probably the weather, which has been a bit cold and miserable. But there's a packed week ahead for me, as I'm going to be emceeing numerous events, both locally and internationally. So I'm taking a deep breath, and I'm glad it was a bit of a quiet weekend, because this week is going to be one for the books. Well, what's coming up in the next hour for you? Well, in a bit, I'll be chatting to the owner of one of Sandton's most loved restaurants, which celebrates over 16 years in business. So don't miss that interview. Then our spotlight interview this week takes a look at the recent Flight Centre Travel Expo that was hosted in Sandton City, and I'll be uncovering all things travel for 2026. So stick around for that. As always, we then catch up with our regular entertainment commentator, Tat Wolfen, who will take a look at the latest entertainment releasing on stage and screens for you this week. And finally, if you've been struggling with your hearing, you heard me right, or maybe you didn't, well, this last interview is for you. A delicious hour up ahead, and as always, I'd like to hear from you, even if you're regular or you're new. And if you'd like to get in touch, you can send through your questions, comments, or a feedback line on editor@sandtontimes.co.za. You can connect on social media @Sandton Times and use the exclusive WhatsApp line 084 Sandton. That's 084 726 3866. And don't forget to check out the Sandton Times website with a couple of interesting articles this past week, sandtontimes.co.za. And if you're not part of the podcast community and you haven't subscribed yet, well, make sure you subscribe to the Sandton Times Hour on all leading digital platforms, Apple, Spotify, Amazon, YouTube, AfroPods, Podcast Party, and be sure to like and share.
You're listening to the Sandton Times Hour.
For more than a decade and a half, one of the restaurants that has helped shape the dining landscape of Sandton is Signature Restaurant. And since its opening in 2009, the establishment has become synonymous with sophisticated cuisine, elegant design, and the kind of dining experience that keeps guests coming back time and time again. And behind the brand is entrepreneur Desmond Mabuza, whose journey into hospitality took an unexpected turn from his world of civil engineering. And he's now perfected the art of running one of South Africa's most respected fine dining establishments. He was born and raised in Soweto, and his vision was to create a restaurant that is packed with exceptional food, impeccable service, music, and design. And it all comes together to deliver something that is more than just a meal, but a memorable experience. And 16 years later, that vision has not only endured, but expanded, with the Signature brand now reaching beyond Sandton to the Sandton of Durban, known as Umhlanga. Desmond Mabuza, welcome to the Sandton Times Hour.
Thank you ever so much. What an honor to be here.
Desmond, it's great to have you on, and especially with a start-off congratulation. You're 16 years in business. I think most restaurants, if they can get past 3 years, it's an achievement, never mind 16 years. But just take us back to 2009 and just share with us what inspired you to open Signature Restaurant in Morningside, Sandton.
Actually, we're 16 going on 17. So in June of this year, we'll officially be 17 years old, which is quite a tall order. You quite rightly said, most restaurants don't even make it beyond 3 or 4 years if they're lucky. Over our time of existence, let me tell you, we've seen them come and go. There's been a lot of ups and downs, as you'd imagine. We stood the test of time. The whole idea behind opening Signature at the time, I used to be one of the founding members and partners of Back of the Moon at Gold Reef City. And we started seeing over time that the dining patterns are getting closer and closer to where people reside. A great deal of our clientele at Back of the Moon at Gold Reef City back in those days was the northern people traveling to the south. And it wasn't an issue to travel 30, 40 kilometers. There was no Uber to rely on in terms of, there was no Uber Eats even for that matter. But for a good night out of great entertainment, great food, great ambience, all under one roof was just not something that was available at the time in the north. So there was a gap for people that are 35 and above that just wanted a good night out, who didn't really want to be in high energy clubs type vibes, but still wanted to be entertained and listen to good music in a greater upmarket environment, great service and great food, all under one roof. When Morningside Shopping Centre was being developed, and I approached the developers at the time, and we started talking, and they believed in my vision. Almost 17 years later, here we are.
Incredible. And I remember back at the Moon, some fantastic duck with black cherry sauce that had me coming back for more. But you made an interesting transition from civil engineering naturally into hospitality. And I say naturally tongue-in-cheek because it seems like never have two worlds been more different than hospitality and civil engineering.
Certainly. Quite a transition it was. And I always say it was an accidental discovery of my passion. Literally, I got into the restaurant industry. The intention was to be just a silent partner. And I'd literally be an engineer by day and then go to the restaurants in the evening. And before you know it, at the time, Back of the Moon, obviously, that was my first venture. It started becoming so popular and so huge. And at the time, all four partners, we were, none of us was there full time. And we had to decide one of us had to be there full on. And I took the leap of faith and I thought, you know what, this I thoroughly enjoy. Let me just go for it. 27 years later, I'm still in the industry and doing it and loving it ever since.
Is there anything from civil engineering that you managed to carry over into restaurants that has been really a good and worthwhile skill? Because I'm assuming there's a lot of things like stock taking, managing the site or the project. I'm sure a lot of those things sort of translate quite well into restaurants.
Very much so. And I always say the discipline that engineering brought into my, the background that it gave me, a lot of it is applied in what I do in my businesses in terms of structure, process planning, being able to, and literally even the building of the restaurants for that matter. I've built quite a few restaurants over time. A lot of my engineering expertise come into the equation. So processes, systems, etc. It's all the foundations and the background that engineering gave me. So I always say, nothing in life that you ever do is ever a waste of time. I think Steve Jobs once said, you can always connect the dots backwards. It's never forwards. So it's do whatever that you have to do. Somewhere along the way in life, it becomes relevant. And essentially, my engineering background very much played a key role in what Signature has become today.
What have been some of the more tougher days at the office for you? What are some of the most memorable disasters that you've had to try and deal with?
Oh, my goodness. I think, the worst we've ever seen was the COVID experience. That was, literally what we thought when the lockdown was announced was going to be 3 weeks. It ended up being 3 months. So you can imagine that, as a restaurant, if the doors are closed, that means there's no revenue coming in. Unlike an insurance company or anything where you just take debit orders and then whether the doors are open or not, money's coming in. In our case, that was not the case. Let me tell you, it was quite nerve-wracking. We ended up actually during that time, if I recall, we were supposed to actually open in level 1, which would have been September, October of that year. That would have just literally decimated the industry. So myself, Natasha, and then Grace Harding from Ocean Basket set up a group called the TRC, which is the Restaurant Collective. And we managed to put together systems and procedures and policies and convince government that, our industry is actually safe to open up. We adhere to the basic hygiene standards in any event, the whole social distancing, et cetera, et cetera. That's how that was shortened to 3 months that we were allowed to open as restaurants. And even then, it was literally a phased approach. We were only just, at first they said, okay, you can come through, but only do takeaways. Nobody can come in. And you can only have so many people. Then there was no alcohol being served, et cetera, et cetera. Then there was curfew. People must leave by 9 o'clock. So it was quite an experience. And let me tell you, I think I lost a few kilos during that phase. But here we are. We made it through, and many a restaurant didn't survive, as you can imagine.
That's it. And hopefully you've come out stronger for it. And I mean, I love how you say you lost a few kilos. I think most of us put on some kilos because we were all sitting at home having to sort of, I don't know, cook up something of our own, not go to Signature.
You couldn't social distance from the fridge.
That's the one thing we couldn't, unfortunately. But you're now expanding the restaurant brand to Umhlanga, which is an interesting exercise because Signature is the kind of restaurant, for those who've been there, that has very much got your signature on it. Like it's a personalized experience. It's a very different exercise trying to scale something like that and trying to reproduce that. What is the thinking behind growing it into Umhlanga, and now how do you make that work from a operational perspective?
Signature, by its very nature, it's a very personality-driven offering. People can expect to see me at the restaurant, and it's part and parcel of the offering. I always say to my family, I'm part of the menu at the restaurant, so it's a little bit tricky not to be there. You get a customer who walk in, and one of the first things they ask is Desmond here. So it makes it very challenging for me. And I think what I've managed to do over time is that to also try to have a management team that, irrespective of me being there or not being there, the operation still runs effortless, it's professional, and everything is run as smoothly as can be. It must run as if I'm still there. But yes, you still have the feel-good factor that somebody wants to be able to introduce their new colleague or business partners. And there's a bit of I want my guests to know that I know the owner kind of vibe, and I need to be there to play to that, as it were. And that's part and parcel of it. And I'm very hands-on. I do try to make sure that everything from beginning in terms of front of house, guests being welcome, how they're being welcome, right through to what happens in the kitchen, etc. So I get my hands dirty. That's just the kind of person that I am, and I worry a lot about detail.
Desmond, before I let you go, what excites you most about the future of Signature? I mean, apart from obviously this expansion now to the East Coast.
I think for me, it's to grow the brand beyond our borders. There's a lot of interest in other parts of the world that have been expressed, currently exploring those. There may still be another opportunity to have something possibly in Cape Town, exploring an opportunity there as well. I'm always hungry for what next to do. I get bored very easily, and I don't like to rest on my laurels too much. So there's still a good, I think I still have a lot of runway in terms of doing 18-hour days. So I enjoy and have a great passion for the industry. And that's really what happens when you do what you love. And again, I think Steve Jobs once said it. You can only do great work when you love what you do. And for me, that's exactly what Signature is to me. I thoroughly enjoy what I do, and it's a great passion for me.
Desmond Mabuza, restaurateur and owner of Signature Restaurant at Morningside Shopping Centre. If you haven't been there, make some time over the coming weeks to go and visit him, celebrating 16 years in business, and you wouldn't be in business for that amount of time if you aren't doing something right. And Desmond, it's been such a pleasure having you on the Sandton Times Hour.
Thank you for having me. Very kind of you.
You're listening to the Sandton Times Hour.
After a 6-year break, the highly anticipated Flight Centre Travel Expo returned, this time to Sandton City Centre Court, and it delivered bigger, bolder and more inspiring travel deals than ever before. 16 suppliers and over 40 brands exhibited at the expo in Sandton City, and the event offered direct access to a leading portfolio of names in global travel. I had a chance to connect with Sue Garrett, GM of Supply, Pricing and Marketing for Flight Centre, for a spotlight interview. And I asked her, why did Flight Centre decide to bring back the Flight Centre Travel Expo?
The reason why we decided to is we've noticed a pickup in demand for travel, and we thought it would be a perfect opportunity to bring the expo back to continue that excitement around travel and hopefully harness that imagination on what is possible to travel in one location. And also obviously having the suppliers on hand allows customers to truly get the experience that they're looking for.
I mean, we're still talking about the pandemic, even though it's been gone for a while. How have things changed and in terms of demand now that we're sort of out of that period? Have you seen a massive resurgence in interest in going somewhere, and has where people are going changed as well?
Post-pandemic, we saw for the first 2 years that real revenge travel. It came back at a massive demand. What we've seen is that's kind of tapered a little now, where people aren't booking and traveling immediately. People are taking their time to really plan a trip. The demand is probably not quite at the levels of pre-COVID times, but it certainly is getting there. And what we are seeing with the increase in aircraft capacity, we are seeing a lot more people traveling further distances than before.
What are you finding are the most popular destinations at the moment, and what's driving that demand?
South Africans tend to travel to very similar destinations. We see the demand doesn't really change much in the top 5 destinations. Mauritius is obviously still the number 1 destination, and we understand why. It's close to home, visa-free, and great for kids. But what we are seeing is the top 10 destinations post that start shifting a little with destinations like Singapore is growing. We're seeing a big interest for Japan, and then different destinations like Antarctica is starting to rise up, and locally still Cape Town is the number 1 destination for South Africans, and we understand why. But with the likes of Club Med bringing in their resort on the north coast of Natal, we are starting to see an interest again in the north coast of KwaZulu-Natal, which is brilliant. Of course, lodges are still on everyone's bucket list, and my advice with the lodges is if you can, wait until last minute rates as South African citizens, because you tend to get really, really good pricing 30 days out.
One of the things that came out of the Flight Centre Travel Report for 2025 is this concept of luxscaping. So plugging in a luxury experience at the end of what many might call a usual holiday, but it's sort of like kind of almost boosting it with that last spa treatment or 5-star resort. How are properties and destinations responding to this blending of cost consciousness and aspirational upgrades?
I think the resorts and hotels are welcoming it. Generally, you wouldn't see a lot of South Africans spending money on those 5-star experiences. So tacking that onto maybe a 4-star experience and having that 5-star at the end, suppliers are really loving. And the other trend that we do notice is South Africans, instead of traveling maybe twice a year, are now doing one luxury holiday and spending more on that holiday, which is fantastic to see.
In terms of your outlook for 2026, you've got some other sort of interesting trends, including something called hospitality, which is sort of people looking to actually go somewhere and do as little as possible and keep it relaxed, keep it calm, so no heavy parties or loud nights out. Currency pressures, global capacity constraints, changing visa landscapes. How does this all impact South African travellers?
It definitely does impact, particularly the visa scenario. If we have a look at the delays in visas for countries like Canada, the US is making it particularly difficult for South Africans. That does impact on destinations chosen, and it always is the case is whenever we take something to market that's visa free, we do see a massive interest and demand for that product. From an economy point of view, obviously at the moment it's brilliant for us with our rand strengthening against the US, but that is always something that everyone takes into consideration, and where we can, we encourage South African travellers, if there is an option to do an all-inclusive sort of holiday where you're paying up front at a set rate to do that, so you're not impacted by any currency fluctuations that may come down the line.
What are you seeing makes a destination more popular than another? Do things like direct flights, visa-free access, rand strength to the local currency, do those play a massive role in people's decision-making? Or are people saying, I'm going on a holiday, I couldn't care less, I'm going all in, and I'm just going to have to suck it up?
I think it's a mix of both, to be honest. I think if we have a look at that more luxury experience, people are less conscious about visas or the rand, but if we have a look at the general South African traveller, that impacts a lot. And I think it also depends how you're travelling. If it's a family holiday, we tend to find people want to stay closer to home, obviously shorter flights, easier flights, and connectivity with children can be quite difficult. So I think it depends on the traveller, but we definitely see a demand for both. It's not kind of one over the other at all.
If you could give us a tip for anyone planning a trip this year, what would that be?
Check visas. Visas are critical, and I think to check on the waiting period for visa appointments before booking anything. We definitely have seen a return to a longer booking period. What we've just come out of was very short booking periods. In December, we saw a lot of travel that was booked in December for December. But looking further forward, we are seeing bookings happening further out. So often for me, I always say the further you can book out if you're traveling internationally particularly, lock that in and do it, particularly if you're traveling over peak periods. So from a local perspective, like I mentioned, bush breaks, that sort of thing, if you are flexible and can do it, wait for those last minute 30-day out opportunities, because there's a lot of those that put those sort of bush lodges that are aimed at international inbound travel. If you're traveling within 30 days on a South African rate, it makes it affordable for South Africans.
After COVID, there was a concern that the role of a professional travel organizer, travel agent had fallen to the wayside with the rise of AI, with people being able to book online. And yet here we are, still seeing a lot of people doing bookings through Flight Centre. What do you put that down to?
Do you know, I do say COVID, whilst it was an awful time for all of us in the industry, we came out a stronger company because people realized how important it was to deal with a reputable company or with an individual rather than, because a lot of people were left stranded after COVID. So I think that almost reiterated the importance of dealing with a travel professional and also with organizations that are accredited because a lot of travel companies didn't survive post-COVID. So it's actually brought that demand back. And I think there's definitely a place for AI and there's most certainly a place for online OTAs, but when it comes to the international sort of travel, or if you're looking for a complicated itinerary, most people still are wanting to deal with a person just to validate their decision, their travel decisions, and have someone to talk to if something that does go wrong.
That's the voice of Sue Garrett, GM of Supply, Pricing and Marketing at Flight Centre, our spotlight interview for this week.
You're listening to the Sandton Times Hour.
Welcome to the second half of the Sandton Times Hour. My name is Alexander Leipner, and if there's anything that you caught on the show but didn't get the details, it happened too quickly or you weren't ready and you couldn't write it down well, hop onto the website, sandtontimes.co.za, and visit the show notes for this week's edition, and you can get a detailed breakdown of everything we've discussed. Chatted about some additional links and details right there. Also, you can check out the social media accounts at Sandton Times if you enjoy a bit of videos or pictures or whatever else comes up on the social media accounts. Make sure you follow. And also, save the WhatsApp number 084 Sandton. That's the exclusive Sandton Times WhatsApp number 084 726 3866. And you can send through your voice notes, text messages, and more. Right, time to get to our entertainment segment of the show every week. And joining us once again is Tat Wolfen, our regular entertainment commentator. And Tat, we've just had so much to talk about this week. I don't even know how we're going to fit it into our segment.
Hey, Alex, and there's just so much going down. So let's launch straight into Kuni and Rocco de Villiers, or De Villiers, if you choose. It's called Kuni and Rocco 88, and it's playing at the Tureen Theatre. And the 88, in case you're wondering, as Kuni pointed out, does not refer to his age. It refers to the number of keys on the grand piano. And there are two grand pianos on stage, and the two gents are backed by Maurice Lotz. In case you're wondering, Kuni and Rocco de Villiers, although they're both big names on the local entertainment scene, they're not related, although I would say they're not closely related, because I'm pretty sure all the de Villierses in this country must have a link somewhere down the line. Yeah,
right.
It's a very, very entertaining show, and they play everything from boere musiek to blues.
Okay.
Most of their patter between is in Afrikaans.
Right.
So if you don't understand Afrikaans, maybe it isn't the show for you.
No subtitles.
No subtitles or surtitles. I am Engelssprekend, but my Afrikaans isn't too shabby, so I could understand what was going on, and I found it thoroughly enjoyable. And there are only limited shows left from Wednesday this week to Sunday, and I believe that there's a matinee on Sunday and a matinee on Wednesday.
All right.
But it's a very entertaining show with two extremely talented individuals. Great fun.
Okay, so hop onto that quickly. Talking about hopping, there's also a new movie out at the cinemas for the kids and maybe for the family as well. Hoppers.
Oh, what a skillful segue, Alex. Yeah, Hoppers. I must tell you, even though the poster makes it look like a kids' movie, it is not. And I have to stress, it's not a kids' movie. Certainly not for small kids. I would say at least 6 upwards. And even then, you might have to do a bit of explaining before you go into the movie. Essentially, it's about a scientific technology that's been discovered that enables humans to transfer themselves into a robot of an animal, a realistic robot of an animal. But not only that, so not only do they look like that animal, but they are then able to communicate with animals.
Tat, I believe we have a trailer. Let's have a quick listen.
Mabel, this technology gives us unprecedented access to the animal world.
You created a fake animal.
Yes.
Which makes the other animals think you're an animal.
Yes.
This is like Avatar.
This is nothing like Avatar.
Hey.
It worked.
Looks like we got a newcomer to the pond. What's your name, Beaver?
Mabel?
Let's welcome Mabel, everyone.
Mabel, they can't know you're a human. She found the button.
Fellow animals! Humans have stolen their last inch of land from us. We gotta fight back.
Let's squish the humans.
Yeah! Wait, squish?
That was intense.
Disney and Pixar's Hoppers, rated PG.
So that's the essence of the movie, right? And it's hectic. It is a heavy movie without going into too many details. Fast moving, and it's quite gobsmacking. There were quite a few parts in the movie where I'm thinking, wow, this is not a kids show. Right. There are lots of sort of philosophical elements to it as well, which would appeal to adults, which I'll go into. Although at some stage the movie does posit that we can find good even in the most evil of souls. So I took comfort in the fact that there was potential for good.
But and it's an animated movie as well.
It's animated and in 3D if you find the right theater. And the 3D was up to Pixar's usual high standards. So visually, it's an absolute treat. Philosophically, there are some very interesting points that the movie makes. One of them that it makes is that we have to start finding middle ground between rabid activists and politicians.
Okay.
Because at the moment, you have politicians preaching at people and activists screaming at the politicians, but no one's actually sitting down and talking. So the movie does make that point, which hopefully adults will pick up on. I think that the movie is also an excellent gateway for discussion between parents and kids after viewing it, which is really what parents should be doing after viewing any movie with their kids, and not just, leaving kids to make their own interpretations, because after all, hopefully parents are wiser.
Yeah.
Another thing I loved about the movie is that it is an animal lovers movie. And it keeps making the point that, we're all in this together, animals, humans, and also different kinds of humans. So we need to actually make a plan to get along in harmony with one another. On a technical note, I have to tell you that I saw it at the Cine 1 or Screen 1 at Mall of Africa, which has a good steepish rake. It's got a big screen, beefy sound system, which rumor has it may be upgraded to Dolby Atmos soon. And even though it doesn't carry the branding of IMAX or whatever, this theater does offer a premium viewing experience. And I must tell you, I just walked out of there so satisfied. And it's that kind of theatrical experience that truly differentiates between a cinema and home viewing.
Okay, well, that sounds interesting. Hoppers on at the cinema. And then we had a couple of farewells, entertainment farewells this week, including Showmax.
Yeah, including Showmax. That was quite a shock, I thought, because I thought that Showmax was probably the best local streaming service we had, because it had access to some of the biggest studios. So it was Paramount and Warner's and HBO and all these big contacts that they had via DSTV. So I was quite saddened to see, well, it hasn't closed down yet, but it's on the verge of closing down. But I think they wanted to consolidate with other DSTV streaming services. And I wasn't even aware, actually, that DSTV had streaming services. I thought they only had linear services which were available online. But
yeah.
We'll have to find out about that in the near future, I guess.
With the Canal Plus takeover, I think we're going to see a lot of shifting happening at DSTV and Milton.
Yeah, as long as it's positive, hopefully, yeah.
We hold our breath. But we also said farewell to quite a few entertainment greats.
Yeah, we had to witness the departure of the very talented Ian von Memety, Solly Philander, and on the international stage, Neil Sedaka. Now, Neil Sedaka actually started off as a child piano prodigy, playing classics like a complete master, but he started writing hit songs even in his teens. You know, he's one of the greatest hit makers of his era. And apparently he was also a very nice guy, never had any controversies or black marks against his name. He was very well loved in the showbiz fraternity. But his biggest hit, I think, was Breaking Up Is Hard to Do. And, you know, it also occurred to me that when we lose artists, musicians, performers that we were very fond of, we kind of go through a bit of a breaking up feeling, don't we?
Yeah.
You know, there's that loss of a connection. So on that sad note, I'm going to bid you a farewell.
Absolutely. Tat Wolfen, thank you much again for connecting, and we'll do it all again next week.
You're listening to the Sandton Times Hour.
So as the world marks World Hearing Day on the 3rd of March 2026 this past week, an important conversation is emerging around something many of us take for granted, our hearing. While most people associate hearing loss with simply turning up the volume, experts say the real issue is often about clarity and how effectively our brains process sound. In fact, when hearing begins to change, it doesn't always feel like sound is disappearing. Instead, conversations may require more effort, meetings may leave you feeling unusually drained, and noisy environments can suddenly become exhausting rather than enjoyable. Well, joining me on the line is Olivia Blackbeard. She is the head of Audiology at Spec-Savers to talk about why hearing is really about clarity, energy, and brain function, not just volume, and why an annual hearing check could make a significant difference to your overall well-being. And Olivia, it's good to have you on the Sandton Times Hour.
Great to be here.
So first off, I think it's such an interesting topic, especially on a platform that relies on 100% of people being able to hear, because that's just the nature of an audio, radio, podcast, digital audio conversation, is that there's no other way of actually receiving it except for listening. So what are some of the early signs that someone's hearing may be changing, even if they don't realize it as yet?
So it's actually normally the family who normally discover that they are starting to struggle with their hearing. They pick up that they're not listening and they're missing certain things in conversations. So firstly, the family tells them, you should go get your hearing checked. But as yourself, you should be checking out for when you are increasing the TV volume and when you're increasing your cell phone volume, or even just increasing the volume on your laptop when you're doing a meeting. That's a really subtle sign, but it indicates quite a bit, as well as blaming people that they are suddenly mumbling all the time and not talking clearly. And then also ringing in the ears. So like tinnitus, what we call tinnitus. It's basically a fluttering sound, or some, they call it sonbiases. People always complain about hearing that in their ears. So those are the main ones that I would focus on.
I thought it's quite interesting that you also touch on the fact that it's not just about reduced sound, but you actually also encounter the sort of fatigue that happens, like this hearing fatigue. Why does that happen?
So your brain has enough capacity to focus on meetings and to focus on what you're doing. But what happens is that you are focusing your energy so much so on what is being said to you and listening in on that conversation that you end up not retaining that information, and you get so tired because you are focusing so much on what is being said as opposed to remembering what is being said. So your brain just runs out of energy. You're tired after those meetings and the hard day at schools because of that amount of focus that you have to put on listening and not actually on the subject matter themselves.
But I suppose there's also sort of other consequences that come as a result of that, because I suppose if it's becoming so difficult for you to hear and to listen, do you find that people then also just sort of switch off, that they kind of just don't form part of conversations, don't engage on a social basis, and just sort of almost become a little bit recluse because they just realize that they don't know what's going on?
Yes, definitely. It's a major part of a hearing loss is that you become isolated in your own little bubble. And it's really, really a negative side effect, because being isolated like that and turning off to the world around you, you're then putting yourself at risk for early dementia, early onset dementia, Alzheimer's, all of those kind of mental problems as well. Depression can also come into it quite a bit, and anxiety when you go into social situations. So it can have a huge psychological impact on your family around you as well, because your family gets very upset with you because they believe you are not listening, but it's in actual fact you're not hearing them.
So what are some of the real world dangers when it comes to reduced hearing functionality? I suppose there's the obvious ones, but then there's also the less obvious ones that you've touched on just a second ago.
Yeah, so real world dangers, you would really have to consider putting your headphones too loud. That's going to be a direct impact to your ears, and that's really going to damage your hearing over time. It is a gradual thing, but it does definitely impact your hearing.
There's often this perception that hearing loss only affects older people, but we are seeing younger people also experiencing hearing challenges. And I guess it's also got something to do with this rise of cancel headphones or noise cancelling headphones, these earbuds. People at the gym, people are on public transport. They're trying to block out the sound around them by listening to something else. And you're now seeing younger people being impacted by worsening hearing functionality.
Yes, exactly that. So because we are in such a technological environment at the moment, you can't run away from it. But the environments that the people do go into are a lot louder than what it used to be. And going into the gyms and then putting your headphones on and just increasing the volume until you can hear your music, that's already going to affect your hearing. So what we do like to suggest when you are wearing headphones is that you stick to the 60-60 rule. So you should be using your headphones for 60 minutes at 60% volume. If you can stick to that rule, then you know your hearing is safe. So another good rule of thumb is to also have someone talk to you from in front of you and have a conversation while you've got your headphones on. If you can hear that person perfectly and you can follow the conversation, then you know that your headphones are at a good volume. If you can't hear them, you must decrease that volume, definitely.
Sure. Well, many people are considering hearing aids to be very outdated. It's something that's for old people, or they just look very chunky and very unsexy. How has hearing aid technology evolved in recent years? And I know, for example, Apple has now also brought out these earbuds that have some sort of sound enhancing functionality. It might not be a hearing aid, but it's something equivalent to.
Yeah. So hearing aids nowadays are absolutely amazing. The technology inside of them is fantastic, and it's developing year upon year. So now you can listen to music from your hearing aids. You can stream phone calls, Zoom meetings. All of that can be done via your hearing aids. And that itself is just amazing because it amplifies where it's needed. So that's also a major difference between any other amplification and then hearing aids. Hearing aids specifically take your results of your hearing test into account, and they amplify where it's needed and when it's needed. No other amplification does that, and that's why they are a little bit more pricey.
Well, I think even theatres like the Teatro at Monte Cassino, you can even plug into the theatre's audio system directly to be able to see the play as the audio is recorded from stage, which I think is almost as attractive for me to want to go and get somehow. So that's incredible. Listen, you guys have got some complimentary hearing screenings only for March at Spec-Savers. What do people expect from a hearing test? How long does it take? What does that entail?
So what happens is that when you book your eye test, come in as well for a little bit earlier so you can do your free hearing test. It's a little screening that we do just to make sure that your hearing is within normal limits. And if it's not within normal limits, we can guide you from there and give you the best advice possible. All our audiologists are fully qualified and they'll be able to direct you in the right direction.
Well, there you have it. If you want to carry on listening to the show and you want to get it in crystal clear volume, then you might want to check out that complimentary hearing screening. And it's been an absolute pleasure. Olivia Blackbeard, Head of Audiology at Spec-Savers, thanks for making the time and for drawing our attention to this very important public service announcement.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks, Olivia. And with that, it's time to wrap up the Sandton Times Hour. But if you want to get in touch, you can send through your questions or comments on editor@sandtontimes.co.za. You can connect on social media at Sandton Times or visit the website sandtontimes.co.za. And don't forget to keep our 084 Sandton number handy. That's 084 726 3866 and send through your voice notes and text messages. As always, make sure to subscribe to the podcast too and join the digital family on there, Amazon, Spotify, and other leading digital audio platforms. And thank you to all my guests who made the time to be on the show this week, and of course the team behind the scene pulling it all together as always. A very special thank you to you for listening, and God willing, we'll do it all again next week.